Welcome to Testimony Tuesday. I'm Father Cam Smith from the Missionaries of Gods Love. Pleasure to be able to share with you this afternoon. I'm a priest serving in Melbourne. Currently, I grew up in Melbourne as well. I've been a priest for 3 years. Before I jump in and share my testimony with you, how God's worked in my life, I just want to start with a prayer that the Spirit can work in our hearts today. Lord, thank you for the gift of life that you give us and the way that you draw us into relationship with you and draw us to journey with you through the many surprising and unexpected and beautiful moments of life. Thank you for the way that you've worked in my life and for the opportunity to share that today, and I pray that you work in my heart as I share and in the hearts of our listeners, that they can discover something of your goodness today. I ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. So I have journeyed with Christ in many, many ways, up and down over the years. And where to really begin my story? I'll begin as so many classic testimonies do, that I was born and raised as a Catholic and went to Mass for many, many years. My mum was Catholic and raised us going to church, and we went to Catholic school, Catholic primary school, Catholic high school. I say we. I'm the youngest of 3 kids. I got an older brother and a sister. So we all received, were baptized, First Communion and Confirmation and Reconciliation and things as a child. And we were the kind of family that's really actually involved in the parish. That kind of, we volunteered for a lot of things. Even my dad, who wasn't Catholic at the time, he would be involved in different ministries in the parish. We were like right in the center of parish life. We were close with the parish priest. I remember him coming around for dinners when I was young, and that was great. I kind of always understood that being Catholic, being part of the church, was a part of my life. It was a part of what made up who I was, but I suppose I didn't understand what that deeper level of faith was back then. It was just something that we did and went along with it. As I grew up, I suppose particularly at high school, I started to think about the world a bit more, understand things. I ended up going on to study science, so I think I think about the world in that sort of way. And there were these kind of ideas rolling around in the back of my head of that if science can explain kind of how the mind is made up and how the human body works, if science can explain how all the stars sit in the universe and all of those things, then why do we need God to explain that? That was just, it wasn't something, I didn't kind of wrestle with that and try and find the answers. This was just some thoughts that were going on in the back of my head. And I think gradually there were these doubts that came up. I was still happy to go along and be at church and do those Catholic things and be a Catholic. But if you had to ask me, do I really believe in God? I wouldn't have been able to say a straight yes. So that was just going on in the background of my mind and in my heart for some years. I think at the tail end of high school, I was actually kind of starting to make some decisions for myself to actually practice my faith. I remember we had a little prayer group at school, and we would meet at lunchtime, and it was just kind of, we would pray for different things in the world, pray for peace and pray for this and that. But it was the kind of thing that I would have to leave the game of soccer with my mates halfway through lunchtime. And, they would ask, oh, where are you going? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the chapel. So it was beginnings of kind of actually taking my faith a little bit seriously there. But the big thing that happened when I was in year 12 was that my parish started to gather some youth together. It was the first time they'd done that sort of thing, which was mainly looking towards World Youth Day in Sydney was going to be the next year. So they were gathering the youth to... initially, it was just to have some youth and young adults to be able to host the pilgrims for Days in the Dice, but we did end up sending a group to Sydney. So I went to Sydney with not only pilgrims from my parish, but pilgrims from my deanery, so the 7 parishes in the local area. We went together as a group, and that was it was a beautiful time to connect with these other young Catholics, connect with them who take their faith seriously, and there's still some great friendships that I enjoyed today. And it was a time, I remember on the train going up there, Actually, I because I'm so big, I can't sleep on trains or planes or buses or anything. So, and I was sitting at the very front of the carriage, and there was a light like in the in between bit where the toilets was. And I think I still might have this little bit of paper. I like was writing about what faith was, whether I had faith, whether I believed, what it meant to believe. That World Youth Day time was a time when I actually very slowly took some steps to actually start wrestling with, do I believe in God and Jesus and all this stuff? Like, I was still happy to go along with it and be part of it, to go to World Youth Day and do all the stuff. There was also a friend on that pilgrimage who encouraged me to think about going to reconciliation while I was there. Now, that was something that I hadn't done at all since my first reconciliation. There's a number of factors why there kind of wasn't a culture of individual reconciliation in my parish, but I don't need to go into that. So I hadn't gone for all those years, and he was encouraging me and a couple of the other young fellas to think about going. And I was seriously thinking about it. I almost could have. I remember on the Saturday night that there was reconciliation available, but I didn't. It was a bit of a big step. So I came back from World Youth Day, and that took my faith involvement, my parish involvement, to the next level. So we had kind of the young adults group was really vibrant coming off of that. The next year we started up a youth group, and somebody decided to volunteer me to be one of the key leaders. So suddenly I was running a youth group without having any idea what on earth we were doing. It's just pizza and games. But I was giving like most of my Sundays to doing church stuff and to being at church. I was doing music ministry as well, so I'd be going to multiple masses on a Sunday. So it was becoming more and more important a part of my life. But also through getting to know some people from the other parishes around, I was getting invited to some new stuff that I hadn't encountered before. And a key invitation that I received was to come along to a thing called Young Men of God Soccer, where I met a bunch of Missionaries of God's Love seminarians on just a random park field on a Saturday afternoon, where they would play soccer with any other young fellas that came along. So I went along at the invitation of a friend, knowing one of the brothers, and I just really loved it. I wouldn't have been able to express it at the time, but I think that was the positive and affirming nature of the environment that was there. I remember actually feeling uncomfortable when one or two of the brothers would like affirm me for something, say like, "Oh yeah, you got like really good hustle, mate." And I was like, "Ooh, why are you saying that?" I think just the kind of culture we have in Australia of a lot of negative humour was what I'd been immersed in, what I was used to, and this kind of actually positivity, like we can like both sides celebrate when someone kicks a goal. That was like a bit weird for me, but I loved it, and I kept on coming. Every week I was waiting for the email to see whether soccer was on or not. So I kept on going for a while, and then it came a time, I'd been going for at least a year by this point, but I had heard that this Young Men of God ministry, they were running a retreat weekend. And I had planned to go to the football that weekend, so I wasn't intending to go. And I went along soccer the week before, and I brought it up in conversation with one of the brothers, only to kind of confirm for myself that soccer wasn't going to be on, because they'll all be at the retreat weekend. But that meant that they could invite me along and try and convince me. So two of the brothers separately tried to invite me that afternoon at soccer. And then, because that would be Saturday afternoon, and Saturday evening I would play music with my other friends, the friends who invited me to the soccer game originally. And my mate invited me along, and then his wife invited me along as well. And after the fourth invitation, I finally gave in and decided to go to this retreat weekend. And yeah, it was something that I really hadn't experienced at all before. It was great that there were a couple of us mates that could go along together, who some of us were new to this sort of thing, so I wasn't alone. But it was just about 25 guys out in a bit of a rural sort of setting, and yeah, there were talks about, what it means to be a man of God, what God is calling us to be as men, and that was something that I hadn't kind of heard before, that sort of challenge, that sort of vision for a Christian life. I hadn't experienced the kind of small group dynamic of we were sitting around sharing in between the sessions, like, what's God saying to you? What's your prayer life like? What do you believe? How do you express your faith in your life? And not something that I'd ever done with other fellas before. So that was just opening me up a little bit, the experience of that weekend. I really also enjoyed there was praise and worship throughout the weekend too. And being someone who loves music and loves singing with a really, really loud voice, I relished that. It was probably one of the loudest ones singing. But it came to the Saturday night, and what had really happened across that weekend was these doubts that I was talking about earlier, these doubts of like, I don't know if God really needs to exist because I understand the world in this sort of scientific way, and is he really real? And I don't know if I believe in God. These doubts that had been for many years growing and sitting under the surface. This environment of the retreat weekend had just slowly, gradually given me the courage to actually look at that, to actually think about it and go, okay, well, kind of what do I do with this? This is something of the thought process that went on in me that weekend, or particularly on the Saturday night, that I'd experienced so much goodness in my involvement in the church, particularly the friends that I've been gathering with and hanging around over the last couple of years by that point. I was pretty convinced that it was a good thing to be like running a youth group and getting kids along the church. There was all this kind of goodness that I kind of believed was there in my involvement in church. But I prayed this prayer of like, well, God, if you are the goodness that's behind all of these good things, then I want you. It was kind of like I couldn't just kind of push through these confusions or this contradiction and figure out whether God was real. There was like this brick wall in front of me, but it was, God, if you are the goodness that's behind all of these good things that I'm experiencing, then I want you. That was, I think, one of the most powerful prayers I'd prayed in my life, and it had a huge impact. The other thing, which should not be forgotten, that happened on that Saturday night was that I went to reconciliation. So I was about 20 years old at that point. So in grade 2 or 3, I'd made my first reconciliation. This was about 13 years later. And I think it speaks to the power of that sacrament that this is really the biggest moment of outpouring of grace in my life, and it came when I returned to the sacrament. And I was able to pray this prayer, I want you. So nothing actually remarkable happened on that Saturday night. I remember that after the session had finished, we played poker together. But what I do remember is Sunday, the retreat was finishing up at around lunchtime, and me and the other guys I'd driven up with, we were leaving. And as we were walking to the car, one of these guys, who I think it was his first time at something like this as well, I said, oh, we're going back to normal life. And he said something like, yeah, but it's not the same, or it's not normal anymore. And it pointed to the fact that, there's something has happened on this weekend, such that life won't be quite the same again. And that was my experience when I went back. Just gently, there were these things that were different in my life. I began praying every day. That had never been a part of my life apart from maybe one stretch where I tried to say the rosary every day. But suddenly I wanted to sit down and have a conversation with God, pray about the things that are happening, pray about the things that had happened, just talk to him or read the scriptures. I began reading the scriptures, which I had never really done, other than, you hear them at church and we'd study them at school a bit. I had felt, even from that first day, a desire to share this gift that I've discovered. I didn't know what on earth the gift was, but I remember sitting with a friend that very first day when I'd come back from the retreat, and she was like, how was the weekend? I was like, it was great, it was amazing, it was like, yeah. Couldn't put any further words around it than that. But the excitement about this change that had taken place in my heart, I knew I wanted to share that. I was also really, really hungry. Apart from the hunger in prayer to want to connect with God and take up his grace more and more, I wanted to go to anything that anybody would invite me to. I remember the week or two after the weekend, the retreat, I was at a 21st of a guy from school, and there was this guy from school who I'd kind of known from a distance but wasn't that close with, and we got chatting, and I mentioned that I'd been on this retreat weekend, and he started asking about it. I shared a bit, and he was like, "Oh, I go to this youth groupy thing on a Wednesday night," and I was like, "Cool, Wednesday night, I'll pick you up, we're going." I was just hungry to lean into anything I could learn about God, anything I could find out about him. I just want to know him more. So a number of those things that happened, and I was blessed at that time to be able to go to some new youth groups and give myself into that space, to be able to go to some other conferences and experience that. And I started going to the Young Men of God meetings. The brothers would host that in the house on a Friday night every couple of weeks or so. That was a beautiful space to kind of continue this small group journeying together, sharing about what's going on in life, praying together, as well as some good brotherhood. At that time, I was in my last semester of my science degree. And this is another change that happened in life, actually. I had this desire to, and all of those different things, the desire to learn more, the desire to pray, the desire to share it with others. The words I would put around that at the time was that I wanted to glorify God in everything that I did. And I even found that in my studies, I wanted to use my time better. Instead of just sitting around of an evening and watching TV, I wanted to study better. If God's put me here and asked me to do this degree, then I'm going to actually give my time and try, because I'd been pretty much cruising through my science degree. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it at the end, and I was just doing well enough to pass. But then I got the best marks in that last semester than I had since my first semester 3 years before, because suddenly I had a new motivation to apply myself for the glory of God. And I was thinking as well, coming to the end of my degree, what am I going to do with my life afterwards? For various reasons, I wasn't intending on starting a full-time job the next year, so whether I would have studied some more. I was thinking about teaching at the time, which I still kind of like the idea of teaching and sharing knowledge with others, but now I was like, oh, maybe I'll do teaching. I'll study some theology as well, because I'm so hungry to learn about God. That was kind of what I was thinking. Take a year off, study some teaching and theology, and then I can teach RE and science and maths or whatever as well. But about 6 months after that retreat weekend, and all these changes kind of coming in my life, this new desire and motivation, I went to a week-long retreat called Summer School that the Missionaries of Gods Love and the Disciples of Jesus community run. And a few things happened around that. I'd not been thinking about priesthood at all at this particular point. But on the first day when you arrive at summer school, what generally happens, or what happened back then, was that there's different lectures and seminars across the week, and you get to sign up and pick which ones you want to do. So when you come and register on the Sunday, the first day of the camp, there's all these sheets in front of you, and there'll be some people to explain what the different courses are, and you can sign up and put your names down. I remember standing in front of the sheet of paper with the pen in my hand, that it was a seminar about discernment. And the thought that went through my head was, if you go to a discernment seminar, you must be discerning something. And I was associating that idea with discerning a vocation to the priesthood, as we so often do. Discernment is, of course, about anything we do in life, but I was probably resisting somewhere within my heart, admitting that there was something like a call to the priesthood. And I did write my name down, and I went to that seminar, and perhaps that was part of opening up to God's grace that week. And the next day, on the first main night session that they had at the school, I went to a prayer team. And these two people prayed with me. I forget what I asked for or what I was praying for, but the person praying with me had a sense of something that God wanted to say to me, and it was, I should have written it down, really. It's so important in my journey that I should have written it down. It was something like, what God wants is what you want. or what will make you happy is what will make God happy. Something along those lines. And I think that kind of gave me permission to actually let this desire for priesthood that was sitting somewhere deep under a few layers of resistance in my heart, allowed it to come forth. Because across that week, through all the ups and downs and the rest of what happened at summer school, I realized that this desire that's been stirring up in me for the last 6 months to want to glorify God every day in everything I do in my life, the answer to that, the fulfillment to that, is to live this life of the Missionaries of God's Love, to be a priest. I use the word realized because the sense of my vocation within me has been really constant and consistent. That's not the same for everybody who's called to all sorts of different lives, but that's been a great grace that the Lord has given me. By the end of the week, I had told 4 people that I wanted to be an MGL priest, which might be very fast to move on that. This was in January, and I took a whole year to continue to discern that, and I journeyed with one of the MGL priests to talk about that and to get to know more about them. But it was this sense that I saw the way the brothers lived, that whether they're playing soccer together, or whether they're driving around together, or whether they're eating meals together, that they're loving one another, and their whole lifestyle is about sharing the love of God, sharing life together, and accepting and caring for one another. Like that love can be part of every moment of our lives in that. They also do a lot of study, which I'd seen, getting to know the brothers, and I was super hungry to learn more about God. But I think one of the key things was that I had been brought this great gift of knowing God in this profoundly new way by the kind of ministry that they're doing. And I know that I don't know how to share it. I don't even know how to express what this gift is properly yet, but I knew that I wanted to share it. And if these guys are doing that sort of ministry, then I want to be able to bring this gift of faith, this gift of relationship with Jesus to others through my ministry. So I was able to use, then I had the whole next year where I wasn't working full time. I was involved in a number of different volunteering things in my own parish. In our deanery, we had a youth ministry, a couple of other ministries that I was part of the leadership for. I went to World Youth Day again that year and travelled through the Holy Land. I did an overseas mission trip. It was a great space that year that I had where I was already excited and preparing for entry into the brothers. I was able to kind of really give myself generously to service in all these different ministries. I was able to spend a lot of time in prayer and, be reading stuff on the spiritual life and having these conversations, especially with this priest that I was journeying with, but others as well, about what it means to follow your vocation and to be growing in discipleship. So that all culminated in joining the Missionaries of God's Love, which I did in 2012. And after all the years of formation and things, I was ordained. I took final vows in 2018. I was ordained a deacon in 2019 and had a awkward COVID ordination in 2020 with 80 handpicked people in the church. Only 80. So that's the general story of what God's done in my life. And having journeyed as a priest for 3 years now, I'm still discovering new depths of his love, new ways of being in relationship with God, new ways of understanding him and seeing him at work in my life, in the life of others. I'm still even appreciating more and more the ways that he'd worked in such little moments way back then, introducing me to people, or even, it was the 4th invitation that got me along to that retreat weekend. Little things like that God's moving in such beautiful, intricate, delicate ways in our lives, because he's got a plan for each one of us to come into this deep relationship with him, and to find a life and a purpose, a path that's going to make us feel not only totally alive, but also like totally yourself. If we think about vocation, we can so often think, oh, this person did this and this person did this, and there's like a structure of discernment, or there's like the particular paths that you can take. God has a unique path for you to walk. And yeah, if you become a married person, then you're not going to look like every other married person. If you become a priest, you're not going to look like every other priest. And even in my 3 years of priesthood, I've been discovering more and more about, I shouldn't just be telling myself I need to be ministering like that priest, I need to be ministering like this guy, or I need to discover what my gifts are and who God is calling me to be in the church, who God is calling me to be for this person who's in the pews that I'm preaching to, or that's just chatting to me after Mass, or that I'm meeting in the Sacrament of Reconciliation or in spiritual direction, or how is God shaping me, and how has God already shaped my heart to show his love to them today. So I hope that sheds some light on how God might be revealing his love and his purpose for your life, how he's been gently and delicately working in your life, drawing you deeper towards him and opening you up to his grace. And I pray that my words today can be fruitful for you, and that you can find that path to fullness of life, to fullness of love, and to fulfillment that God's got for you in the future. So with Missionaries of God's Love, brothers, we do live a life of poverty, and what that practically means is that we rely on God's providence, which happens in lots of different ways. But one way is that a lot of people in the community do generously support us, and we rely on those donations across all of our missions, especially in our formation houses, where we're pouring our resources into bringing guys up to be able to be priests and brothers and serve the church, be formed for that mission. So if you would like to support us in that way, you can go to mglpriestsandbrothers.org/donate. You can also find out a bit more about us on the website if you'd like to. Thanks, and God bless.